Yeah, so my name is Ryan Delk, and I work at Gumroad. I was going to give a brief explanation of what Gumroad is, but I think maybe everyone already knows. We're a digital commerce platform that empowers creators to be able to sell what they make directly to their audience. And what I want to talk with you about today is data. And specifically the data that helps you go from the ideation of a project or a product that you're working on to the actual launch of this product. Because data can be really, really valuable. When you're looking at numbers and case studies, when you're gearing up for a product launch, or even after you've launched a product and you're thinking about how to maybe improve it, it can be really valuable. And sometimes this maybe looks like taking a look at past data from your past product launches. Sometimes it's maybe emailing some friends and saying, hey, you guys have a similar product. I would love to hear about things that you've seen work really well. And then it can also be reading blog posts. There's a lot of people here that share their numbers publicly, so you can read about things that have worked really well for them. But today I want to sort of lift the veil on the data that we have around product launches, around pricing, around conversions, because we have millions and millions of interactions with thousands of different creators, ranging from ebook authors to people selling courses to films, all the way up to people like Justin Bieber and Coldplay and Bon Jovi and everything in between. And so we have this amazing amount of data on what works well with selling things online in almost every sector of that, but specifically I want to talk about conversion, pricing, things related to launching and gearing up for a launch of a product. And so I've sort of siloed these into three specific topics, and we're going to spend about 3 minutes on each of these topics. And the first one is pricing. So as you're gearing up for a product launch, for thinking about launching something, how many of you have heard this? Always tier your pricing. So most of the room has heard this. A lot of people today have talked about it, and yesterday there's been a lot of blog posts written about it. And the reason is because this works. And it works really, really well for driving additional revenue for a product launch. But one of the hardest things about tiered pricing is figuring out what those tiers should be. And here they are. So these are the best performing price tiers on Gumroad for people that use sort of a 3 price tier for launching a product. And I didn't put absolute numbers in here because this is going to change a lot depending on what you're selling. So if you're selling a book, the lowest tier might be $15, $20, $30, $40. But if you're selling like a course that creates a ton of value for maybe people that are wanting to learn how to design their own web applications or something similar, that low tier might be $50, $100, $200. But the important thing is the multiples, is making sure that there's significant distance between your prices. So your 3 tiers shouldn't be 15, 20, and 25. That would be an example of bad price tiering. And this is what we've seen work best, is this 1x, 2.2x, and 5x. And that 5x might seem really high, but that's actually on the low side of what we see do really well. So some people will price their top tier at 10 times higher than what their bottom tier is. And we'll look at the data for that in a second, but it's really important to distance these tiers out and to have a very, very expensive package, almost irregardless of what you're selling. And again, the reason why this tiered pricing, or people say to always tier your pricing, is because it works. So on average, people that use tiered pricing on Gumroad make 5 times higher than people that launch a product with just a single price point or a single package. So 5 times more revenue just by creating 3 different tiers of products. And then what about the top tier? So it can be really easy to think that that top tier, especially if you're pricing it 5, 6, 7, 8 times higher than your bottom tier, it can be easy to feel like that's too expensive. People aren't going to buy it. Maybe it's a ripoff, or maybe there's not enough value there. But if you do a good job pushing a lot of value into that package, what we see is that 62% of the revenue from a product launch, on average, comes from that top tier. So there's a lot less, in terms of total sales, number of sales, the volume is a lot less, but because of the price, because it's 5 or 6 or 7 times higher, it actually generally makes up for a majority of the revenue from a product launch. And there's a lot of case studies and people in this room that use tiered pricing that you can talk to that would be able to sort of validate this data for you. Number 2. I want to talk about the pre-sale process, and not the pre-sale process in terms of actually pre-selling the product, but pre-sales meaning the things that you're doing in gearing up for launch. And the number one thing you need to remember when you're gearing up for launching a product, or even after you've launched a product, is that emails are gold. They're incredibly, incredibly important for you, regardless of whether it's a SaaS app or an info product or a book, whatever it is. Emails are incredibly, incredibly important. And it's incredibly important to build an email list, a dedicated email list, in addition to whatever your normal newsletter list is, for whatever product you're going to be releasing. And the way to get those email addresses is to incentivize people to give them to you. So how many of you have seen a launch page where someone said, hey, I'm launching this thing, this book, this product, whatever, enter your email address to hear more updates or whatever? How many of you have seen that? Almost everyone in this room. And when I see those, sometimes I put my email address in, but other times I just say, I'll probably hear about that on Twitter. I don't really want to get a bunch of emails from that person. Maybe one of my friends will email me about it when it comes out. I don't really need to give my email. But if I go to one of those pages and it says, hey, if you give me your email address, then I'll give you 20% off when the product comes out. If you buy in the first, say, 12 hours, I'll give you 20% off. I'm much more likely to put my email address into that field and get into that list. Another way that people do it is they'll maybe give me the first chapter of the book for free, or the first few minutes of the film, or the first section of the course, or some sort of past product that they've worked on. I'll get that for free in exchange for getting on their list for a future product. And these dedicated email lists, they work really, really well. Just like tiered pricing, they're incredibly powerful. So products that launch to dedicated email lists, and so this is product that launches to a dedicated email list versus products that just launch by, hey, here's a blog post, here's my new product, some Twitter, Facebook, sharing, all that kind of stuff. On average, 3 times more revenue from the product launches that go to a dedicated email list versus just sort of the standard channels. So incredibly powerful, incredibly important. And how many of you guys have either heard of or read any of Sasha Grief's stuff? Okay, so a few people. So Sasha is a designer, an author from France who lives in Japan. And his most recent book is called Discover Meteor. It came out last year. And what he did with the launch of this is a really great example of how all these things come together and how powerful they are. And so Sasha built a dedicated email list. He told everyone that you could get, I think he gave a launch discount or maybe the first chapter for free if you gave the email list, if you gave your email address to get on his dedicated list for this book. And he promoted it through blog posts, through sort of marketing it to the Meteor community. He's a genius marketer, so he did a lot of things really, really well in this. And the conversion rate on this email list, and this is not like a click-through view-to-purchase conversion rate. This is the percentage of people that were on the list that ended up buying one of the copies of his book, was 15%. So every 100 people that he got on his list, 15 of those went on to buy his product. And again, he did this really, really well. He did a lot of drip marketing. He did a lot of follow-up emails to people that weren't converting. So this is very high. But he had 15% conversion of the total people on the list that went on to buy. And the average purchase from these people was over $65 because he used tiered pricing. His top package was $200 or $300 or $400. And so the average amount that these people were spending was $65, which is almost double the average purchase of people that didn't come from his dedicated email list, that just found it on Twitter or through a blog post or through a friend. And these numbers are impressive, and it's very cool what he did, but it's even more impressive when you combine these two numbers. And when you realize that his average revenue per subscriber from his email list was over $9. And this is important because it shows how key having a dedicated email list is and how much work you can put into getting a new subscriber if you're going to get $9 for every single one. But also if you're doing any marketing leading up to your launch and you're trying to build that list, if you can get a number like this, it allows you to back into how much you can spend, whether it's ads, retargeting, whatever it is, to get a new subscriber onto your list. So emails are gold. They're incredibly important for product launches, for everything you're doing, but specifically when you're gearing up to release a product in that sort of period before you launch. Dedicated email lists are absolutely huge. Number 3 minutes on this, is the actual launch. And so we have a lot of data on product launches, on people that are launching products, whether it's an album, whether it's an info product, whether it's a book, it's a film. And there's a lot of things that people after the fact see that they come to us and say, hey, I didn't realize this was going to happen, or I wasn't expecting this, or hey, this happened. Is that okay? Is that normal? And so hopefully this section can sort of give a little bit of ideas of what you can expect, sort of the average way that things play out. So the first thing is revenue distribution. And specifically if you're launching a product, this can be really, really surprising. And it's something that you can combat really well. And when you see this curve in a second, you'll see why you want to combat it. But this is the average revenue of a new product launch over a couple time periods. So the first 24 hours, generally 55% of the revenue, on average, from a product launch comes in that first 24 hours. The next week, 20%. So another 20% of the revenue coming in that next week. And then the next month after that, another 15% of the revenue. And so you see that 75% of the revenue from a product launch, on average, comes in the first 8 to 10 days. And again, this is not what you should shoot for. You should shoot for flattening out this curve. And there's 2 people here, there's probably more than 2 people, but 2 people here that do this really well and have found ways to flatten out this curve both within their ecosystem and by sort of creating content that drives a lot of sustainable and ongoing revenue, are Josh Kaufman and Brendan Dunn. So highly recommend reading their stuff or talking to them about how they've been able to combat some of this. And then the second piece from a launch is the conversion rates. And so there's a lot of, everyone has audiences in different places. There's social channels, there's blogs, there's email lists, there's places like Reddit, Hacker News, all these things. And you can use all these to market your launch, but it's important to know what the conversion rates you can expect are from these different channels. So starting with YouTube, we see average conversion on YouTube about 2.2%. And this is much lower than the average across all products on Gumroad, what they're seeing. Twitter, a little bit higher, 5.4%, and then Facebook, 6.3%. So this is, the average across all social channels is maybe somewhere around 4%. Again, much lower than the average across all products on Gumroad. But then what about email? The average conversion for products marketed to emails to an email list is 9.4%. And this isn't the stat I talked about earlier, so this is actually view to purchase conversion. So people that are clicking through an email to a product landing page and then purchasing. 9.4% on average. So it's almost double what you see from social conversion, and that's the reason why emails are so incredibly important. Now what about Hacker News? Any guesses on where Hacker News comes in terms of conversion rates? 1.2%. I can't tell you how many product launches we've seen where a post or the actual product has gone to the top of Hacker News and it generates tens of thousands of unique visitors to the page. And it's great for getting traffic, it's great for getting email subscribers, but it's not great for selling stuff. I've seen a lot of people get to the top of Hacker News, get 50,000 uniques from it, and not sell a single product from the traffic that came in from that. So Hacker News is not going to be your number one source for marketing. And email, social if you can, but email is definitely the way to go. So real quick to review, pricing, tier your pricing. The pre-sale period, emails are incredibly important during that period. And then in terms of revenue distribution, the wheelhouse for that is the first 10 days. Again, you want to try to flatten that out. Think about ways that you can do that, but that's sort of where the bulk of your revenue is going to come in if you just launch a product using sort of the standard launch marketing. So thank you guys so much. I'm Ryan r@Gumroad is my email address, and @Delk is my Twitter handle. So would love to be helpful in any way that I can. Feel free to reach out anytime. Thank you guys so much.